If you're watching this video, then I'm guessing you're someone who has very little or no experience in Excel, and you want to learn all the cool things that this tool can offer you. You started working at this new job that uses Excel a lot, and you're spending hours of your time doing these basic data entry tasks when most of your work could have been done quickly by doing these simple functions. Well, stick around, because in this video, I'm going to go over basic concepts and functions that anyone who doesn't know how to use Excel should know. The first concept that you should understand is the difference between relative and absolute cell references. So I have this Excel file called cookies here, and I have this worksheet cell references that contains the table for cookie by type, unit, cost per cookie, total cost, total revenue, and total profit, and the profit percentage by cookies. And one of our main goals is to calculate the values for total cost, profit, and profit percentage by using a simple formula. So to calculate the total cost, we can do something like equals to cell B2 times cell C2. And if we double click this cell here, we get these two cells highlighted in blue and red. And let's say that you wanted to drag this formula down by one row to get the total cost for this cell. If we do that, and by doing control D, we get the formula here, which is cell B, which is equal to B3 times C3 now. If I double click this, we can see that the column stayed the same, but the row number changed when we drag the formula down by one row. This is an example of relative referencing, where the position of the cell that's being referenced isn't fixed in place. So when you try to drag the formula down in any direction, the cell reference can change as well. And let me show you an example of like what would happen if I try to drag this to the right instead. So I'm gonna add another column here, and just for example, right, I'm gonna drag this to the right one place, and we get the value 200 here. And if we double click this, we see that the row number didn't change, but the column number changed instead. So now it's referencing column C and column D and the same row, which is number 3. So I'll just delete this here, and let's drag this down to the last row. And we can do the same thing for total profit here. If we want to calculate the total profit, we can do equals to total revenue minus total cost. And we're going to drag this down, and the cell reference will change at the same time, specifically the row number. Now let's say that we want to calculate the profit percentage by cookies. We can do something like equals to this value for chocolate chip cookies, $100, divided by this total profit here, 1180, and press enter, and we get 8.47% here. But let's say that we drag this formula down, we get a divisible by zero error here instead. And if we double click this, we can see that while it referenced the correct cell here, which is cell F3, it also shifted the cell that contained the total profit down by 1 unit. So it's treating this value as a zero now, which is causing the divisible by zero error. So to fix this, what we can do is that we can fix the cell in a fixed position by using absolute reference, or like using the dollar symbols for both columns and rows. So in this cell here, I'm going to add in cell F8 the dollar position in front of F, so it fixes the column in place, and the dollar position in front of the row number, so it fixes the row in place. Press enter. And if I drag this down, we get the correct percentage this time. And we can see that this formula is referencing the correct cells, and this formula is referencing the correct cell. The cell reference here stays in place now. And we can drag this to the last row as well, and we get the percentage by each cookie here. So this is an example of like what the difference between relative and absolute reference is. Something I use all the time at my work is paste values. Basically, I have a function or formula return a result, and instead of showing something like this formula here in the formula bar, I want to show a hard-coded values like 8.47% instead. So let me show you an example here on this cell here. So if I do Control C, and if I want to do paste values, there's two ways you can do it. Well, two ways that I use commonly, which is Control Alt V for the paste special menu, and then you click on values here and click OK, and you get the hard-coded value here. But another way, if you have Microsoft 365, is doing Control Shift V, and you get the hard-coded values that way. There's more ways to do paste values than those two that I showed you, but those are the faster methods for me though. Now, let's say that you wanted to do like a paste value for this entire table here in another worksheet or like another range. You can select this table here or the range, do Control C, and I'm just gonna go to this worksheet for paste values, and I'm gonna do Control Alt V and just select values, and I'll auto size everything. Now notice that it also got rid of the formatting, and if I look at this here, we get the hard-coded values for total cost, revenue, and profit percentage and profit. The next big thing to know are the aggregate functions. And by aggregate, I'm talking about functions like sum, max, min, average, and count. Let's go to this aggregate functions worksheet here. And we have this table here that shows the different type of cookies and the number in inventory for each of them. We have the chocolate chip cookie, the oatmeal cookie, peanut butter cookie, sugar cookie, and the delicious broccoli cookie. In this table here, we're going to use each of the function that I mentioned before, and they're very easy to use. For sum, we can do equals to sum, select the range that we want to find the total for, which will be in this case this range here, and press enter, and we get the total number for inventory for all these cookies here. For average, you can do equals to average, tab, and select the range again, and you get the average number of cookies from these 5 categories here. For max, we're gonna use the max function to find the largest value from the range, and we get 1000 here. Same thing for minimum, but this is gonna find the smallest value. Oh, and you've noticed that I've been selecting ranges here. You can also select each cell individually like this, but that can like take a while to do if you have like a lot of cells that you're referencing. So press enter, and we get back 25 as the lowest cookie. And next will be count. Now, count is a bit different from the other aggregate functions I mentioned. If I do equals to count, we have two of these here, count and count A. The count function returns the number of cells in a range that contains numbers. So if you had a range of A1 through A10, a mix of numbers and letters like A, B, C, or something, or other characters, it's gonna only count the numbers only. If you want to count all the cells in that range that's not blank, you can use the count A function instead. If I do count A, reference the range, we get back 5 here, showing like there's like 5 types of cookies. Now I reference column B here. It's better to like reference column A instead, since that's the main category that we're trying to count. Besides knowing the aggregate functions, you also want to know how to use conditional functions like if and ifs. Let's go to this worksheet here, and we have the table for the different type of cookies, number of cookies, profit, and another column for yes or no, which we'll showcase the functions on. If you want to find cookies where the profit was greater than or equal to 0, then you can do something like equals to if here, and the logical test will be the cell that we're comparing the value to, which will be cell C2 here, is greater than or equal to 0. And if the value is true, then we want to return yes. Otherwise, if the value is false, we want to return no instead. And press enter. And we get back yes here. And fill the formula down. We get yes here for 10,000, yes for 0. These two values are negative, so they're going to be no, and yes for a positive 20,000 here. Besides using the if function by itself, you might also try to combine it with different operators like the and or function. So let's say that you want to find the number of cookies that are greater than or equal to 100, and the profit is greater than or equal to 0 at the same time. What you can do is that you can do equals to if, and in the logical test, we're going to use the and function, which checks whether all arguments are true and returns true if all of them are true, which is a mouthful to say, and do tab. And logical one in this case will be the number of cookies is greater than or equal to 100, comma, and the second logical argument will be the profit, where we want it to be greater than or equal to 0, and close this parentheses out for the and function, comma, and if the value is true, then we want to return yes, otherwise return no, and close parentheses. and press enter. And we get back yes here, which satisfies the condition. And if we drag this down, let's see what changes. The only thing that changed was this row here, and that's because while the profit is greater than or equal to 0, the number of cookies was less than 100, so it's going to return no here instead. The opposite of and is or, and if we do something like, if we want to say that where the profit is greater than or equal to 0, or the number of cookies is greater than or equal to 100, then it's going to try to evaluate one of the conditions, and if one of them is true, then it's going to evaluate everything else as true at the same time. If I search changes to or here, checks whether any of the arguments are true, and returns true or false. Returns false only if all the arguments are false. So if I press enter here, we get back yes as well, since both arguments are satisfied. And if I drag this down, we get back this as yes, because like even though the number of cookies is less than 100, profit is at least 0 here, and both of these are less than 100 cookies, and profit is less than $0, so they're going to be no. If you have Microsoft 365, you can use the ifs function if you want to include like multiple like nested if arguments instead. So let's say that instead of like profits being greater than or equal to 0, we have one condition where if the profit is greater than 0, we're going to return yes. If profit is less than 0, we're going to return no. But if it equals exactly 0, then we're going to return break instead for break even. So I'm going to delete these formulas here, and I'll do equals to ifs. And this checks whether one or more conditions are met and returns the value corresponding to the first true condition. So if I do tab, logical test 1 will be in this cell. If it's less than 0, then we're going to return the value of no. And if logical test 2, if this cell is greater than 0, we're going to return the value of yes. Otherwise, if this cell equal to 0, we're going to return break for break even. Close this up and press enter, and we get yes here, and drag this down, and we get break here, no, no, and yes. So this is one way to do like multiple like conditions at once. If you don't have the access to the ifs function, there is a workaround where you can do like a nested if. You can do multiple if functions nested inside of each other. So you can do equals to if this value is greater than 0, then return true and return yes. Otherwise, we want to use another if function. If this value is less than 0, then the value true would be returned as no. Otherwise, you would want to return break instead. And close this out. We get yes here, and fill this down, and we get the same exact output as before now. This is another way of using the ifs function if you don't have access to it. One of the most important things you should learn is how to look up values through the VLOOKUP function, index match formula, or the XLOOKUP function. In any job you have, you'll be asked to look up multiple values from one table to another, and knowing these functions or formulas will make your life much easier when you're doing that. If we go to the worksheet here, Lookup Functions, we have two tables here. The first has a date, invoice number, invoice amount, and overall rating columns, and the second table has the columns for invoice number and rating. Our main goal is to populate the data in column D for overall ratings based on the data here in the second table by using the invoice number that appears in both tables here. And we can do that by using the lookup functions and formulas. So let me show you the first lookup function that you're expected to know pretty much in every job, which is the VLOOKUP function. So we can do something like equals to VLOOKUP, and it's going to say looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table, and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specified. So if we press tab here, we have these arguments here: lookup value, table array, column index number, and range lookup. Now I've uploaded a past video where I go into like more details on like how to use the VLOOKUP function and what it does. And if you're interested in learning more how to use that, then definitely check out that video that I'm gonna like showcase here. So to use the VLOOKUP function, we have the lookup value. The value we're trying to look up is the invoice number here in column B. And then we do a comma here. And the table array that we're going to be using, that we're going to be referencing, is the second table, which will be this here. since it also contains the invoice number and the ratings. And I'm going to lock these cells in place as well. So when I drag the formula down, the cell references doesn't change, comma. And the column number is that we're going to be looking at this table here. And since we're starting at this column here, this will be column number 1, and the rating column will be column number 2 here. And the value that we want is the rating, so we're going to enter 2 here, comma. And the range lookup, we're going to try to look for an exact match. So we can either do like 0 for exact match, or false for exact match, or like if you want to do approximate match, then you can do 1 or 2. So I'll enter true. I'll enter 0 here, close this out, and press enter. And we get the value here for very bad. Now it should be noted that like if we go all the way down here, we have 560 rows of data here in the first table, but the second table only shows 555. So we're not gonna be like, we won't be seeing the data appear for some of the invoice numbers here. So if we drag this down to the last row, we get all these values populated here. And you'll notice that if we look at this invoice number, it shows like an NA error here. That's because the invoice number for this doesn't exist in this table here. So let's say that we want to replace the NA errors. We can use another function inside outside of this VLOOKUP function, like the if NA function here. So we can do if NA, and it returns the value you specify if the expression returns like an NA error. Otherwise, return like the result expression. So we're gonna do if NA. The value will be the VLOOKUP function here, comma. And if it shows an NA, then you just want to say no invoice here as the alternative text to like the NA error. Press enter, and I'll just drag this down here. And we get the formula updated now, where all the NAs shows like no invoice instead. Next, I'll be showcasing the index match formula. The index match formula is probably better than the VLOOKUP function, as it is way more flexible to use in the sense that you can search for values left or right. Index match is also useful for handling duplicate lookup values. The only issue would probably be the formula being a combination of two functions, so it will take some practice to understand how to use the index match formula. But if you're interested in learning more, then definitely check out this video that I uploaded before, where I go into more details on how to use the index match formula and how it works. Let's start off by typing out the word index. So if we do equals to index, and we get a description here where the index function returns a value or reference of the cell at the intersection of a particular row and column. So I'm going to do tab, and we get about 3 arguments here. The array, the row number, and the column number. The array region will be the region that we're trying to get the data from. So it'll be to this table here. So I'll just select this whole table here from the first row, including the header region. And I'm going to freeze the cell reference and point so that when we drag the formula down, the cell location doesn't change either. So I'm going to do a comma next for the row number. Now at this point, I'm going to have to use the match function for this. And if I type out match, it basically returns the relative position of an item in an array that matches a specified value. And if I do tab here, and the lookup value in this case will be the invoice number in the first table, comma, the lookup array will be the invoice number column here in the second table, including the header region, since our table here starts, includes the header as well. Drag this down, and I'm going to freeze the cell reference in place as well, and comma, match type will be 0 for exact match, and close this out. And now we're going to have the column number as well. So the match function will try to locate the row number for this invoice number in this second table here. And the column number that we're going to try to look up is in column 2 here as well. So since our array region references both column H and I, the invoice number column is treated as column number 1, and the rating column is treated as column number 2. So I'm going to enter 2 here and close this out and press enter. And we get the value here for very bad here. And let me drag this formula down, Control D. And let's check to like make sure that our lookup value or our value was returned correctly here. So invoice 585552. If I do Control F, 585552, and it's gonna say very bad here. And in the second table, it should show the same thing, very bad. So that's good to go. And let's do another one as well, 351200, which shows bad here. 351200. So 351200 in the first table shows bad. Second table, it shows bad as well. So that's pretty good. And if we go to the bottom of this row here, we get the not available error back here as well. So we can just fix that by enclosing the formula here with the if na function. So if na, the value will be this formula here, and then comma. We want to say no invoice again, and close this out and press enter, and just drag it down. And now we got rid of all the na errors here as well. So that would be it for the index match formula. And with that, we can finally move on to the next lookup function that's super popular, but came in later Excel versions, which is the XLOOKUP function. The XLOOKUP function is available for Excel 2021 and Excel for Microsoft 365. And compared to VLOOKUP and index match formula, XLOOKUP is way easier and flexible to use. So let's start off by doing equal to XLOOKUP. And we have the description here. Searches a range or array for a match and returns the corresponding item from the second range or array. So that sounds complicated, but it's very easy to use once I show you how to do it. So I'll do tab here, and we have these arguments here. The first three arguments are mandatory, while the last three are optional. So the first argument is lookup value. So I'm going to reference the lookup value that we're trying to get the data for, which is this invoice number here, comma, the lookup array. So what array are we looking up that we can get the data from? So which in this case is this range here in column H. I'm just gonna, you can either select the whole the column that contains all the data here, like the specific range here, or you can just select the entire column by doing control space. I just do control space because it's faster for me that way. Up next is the return array. And in this case, it'll be the ratings here in the second column, the value we're trying to get the data from or return the data for, control space. And before I forget, I also want to freeze these two columns in place. So I'll do F4 here to freeze column H and F4 here to freeze column I. And let's say that if there's no value found, like the not available errors I showed you for the invoice that didn't exist for this table here. Well, what you can do is you can use this argument here, the optional argument, and it works exactly like the fna function, where you can just type out invoice not found, and for any value that the xlookup function can't find, it's just going to replace with invoice not found instead. And the last two arguments is match mode, so you're trying to search for an exact match or something like that. And the last argument I don't really use that much. If I close this out here and press enter, we get the same values before, very bad, and do control shift down, and the no invoices will get replaced by invoice not found here. So if I do control D, now we populated all the values here using the xlookup function. So once again, you want to make sure. So I'm just going to search up a random invoice like this here, 406313, and let's see if it returned the correct value. So this one says very bad, and this one says very bad here, so that's good. So let's do something else, like a very good invoice here. So copy this, and this one should say very good, which it does here. So that's basically a very simple showcase of how to use the xlookup function. The next and one of the most important concepts to know are pivot tables. In any office job you have, you'll be expected to know how to use a pivot table, and pivot tables are just ways to summarize data in Excel. And you don't have to be super advanced and your knowledge of pivot tables, as long as you can find the sum of values based on categories or average or even a percentage. It should be good for most jobs. So let's go to this worksheet here called pivot tables. And to make a pivot table, we're going to go to the insert tab here. You can also use keyboard shortcuts as well, but in the insert tab, you can select the pivot table option here, or the button here. Select this, and we'll get this menu here. we're going to select the table or range and the location that our pivot table will be. In this case, we're going to put the location for the pivot table in cell A1 of this worksheet. But for the table or range, we're going to go back to this worksheet here and select the first table here to summarize all the ratings and stuff. So I'm going to select the table here and just click or press enter, and we get this pivot table menu here. And let's say you want to find the total invoice amount by ratings. You can just drag this overall rating here into rows, and we get the rows for each rating here, unique rows. And if you want to summarize the data, like find the total amount, you can drag this invoice amount value here into the value section here, and we get the total invoice amount by each rating here. You can also format this as a currency, and the total, it would be 277,000. So let's say that you wanted to do like a percentage of each value by rows here. What you can do is you can drag the invoice amount data here in values again, and then in the second option here, you can do a left click and go to value field setting and go to show value as percent of grand total, and we can even change the column name here. So let's say percentage percent invoice amount. Click OK, and we get the percentage here now. If you also want to change the headers here, you can just go to this formula bar directly and change this into rating, and you can change this to like total invoice amount. And let's say that you didn't want to find the sum value, instead you want to find the average or something like that. You can go back to this values here, the total invoice amount here. We'll do a left click, go to value field setting, and you can summarize the value by selecting one of the options here. In this case, we can like select average, and it'll show the average value based on each category here. To find the count, you can do the same thing, left click, value field setting, and do count. And we get this count, but formatted as a currency. So you can just format this back as a general, and we get the total number of ratings for each invoice. So if you want to like sort the data, there's a couple of ways you can sort them, but one way, so you can select this option and just sort them based on the ratings here, like this. So this will be just like a basic overview of how to use pivot tables. But there's so many more things you can do with pivot tables as well, like creating your own dashboard, well, creating your own dynamic dashboard, or summarizing the pivot table data even more and within this tab here. And that would be it for concepts and functions you should know when starting out in Excel. Obviously, I haven't covered everything else you should know in this video, but be sure to stay tuned as I'll be uploading future videos that covers other topics. If you guys found this video to be helpful, then please like and comment down below what else you'd want to see. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Until then, I'll see you guys next time.